something like that, but they should have been held to account, yes, responsible for a lot of what happened. And people don't usually blame them for anything. Same in Iraq today, you see. We have Tony Blair, who's a big supporter of Bush, or vice versa. It's not clear whose idea, the original idea to go into Iraq was, Bush's or Blair's. They were both equally enthusiastic for it. But Blair is always tying it to the Palestine problem. He always wants the Palestine problem, you know, as if the Palestine problem, the British haven't messed that up enough, they want to do more there. So things haven't changed a lot on the British part. They don't acknowledge their responsibility. They created the Iraq situation to a certain extent themselves. They went into Iraq, the same as the French went into Vietnam. The French created Vietnam and all the problems there. Ho Chi Minh and everyone fought against the French. We picked up the mantle from the French for some odd, unknown reason. The British created Iraq. It didn't exist. These were provinces in the Ottoman Empire, separate provinces. They put 3 different provinces together and made a country called Iraq. They created the country. There was no country called Iraq before the British created it. They even gave it its name. They put a king there from this royal family in Mecca. It wasn't even a royal family. It was just the Sharifs, a noble family that headed the Hajj in Mecca. How come they didn't have anything in Mecca? What happened to the Sharif family in Mecca? Do you know?
The Sauds took them over.
The Sauds threw them out. Who are the Sauds? The Saud are this family from eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula. The Sharifs of Mecca had no power at all. They were just a figurehead, religious honorary position. The British gave them power. The Sauds did. They had this Wahhabi religion and tribal sheikhs, and they also had another person behind them who helped them move forward into power and was involved in the oil exploration and so on. A person called Philby. His name was St. John Philby. In English, they would call that St. John Philby. Have you ever heard of a Philby? Never heard of the spy scandal in the CIA and the British government? Kim Philby, the third man and everything? It was his son, who was the man who was in the British intelligence, who was a Russian spy, who eluded all the American exposés from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and finally fled to Moscow and was made a brigadier general in the Russian army. Kim Philby. Anyway, that's this Philby's son. His father sponsored the Saudi royal family, so you had Philby operating on one side and Lawrence operating on the other side. I think it was that Philby was involved with the colonial office in Britain, who had an India interest, so that was the eastern side. Lawrence was involved with the Foreign Office in England, who were interested in diplomatic and foreign affairs, Versailles Conference, and the two were supporting 2 different groups in the Arabian Peninsula and fomenting unrest and trouble. And ultimately the Sauds won and threw these Lawrence Sharif people out of Arabia. In 1926, a guy called Faisal, who was one of Saud's sons, defeated the whatever was left, and they never really had an army, the Hashemites in Mecca, and threw them out. And they've never been back since. The Sauds took over all of Arabia under Philby and others, cajoling, inspiration, and advising, and so on. So then the Sharifs, the Hashemites, went up to Transjordan. So the Foreign Office then, with Lawrence and others, gave them Transjordan to play with. And Iraq, they gave them Iraq too. They brought this Faisal, who had been thrown out of another Faisal, this is, the Hashemite Faisal. They gave him the one that Lawrence was working with. He was thrown out of Syria by the French in 1919. They gave him Iraq. They thought, oh, well, Iraq, he'd be good there. But when the Saddam Hussein type Baathists took over Iraq, they killed the whole royal family the British put in there wiped them out totally. So that was the end of Faisal's part of the Hashemite family in Iraq. So what am I saying? The British created Iraq, created the mess there, but they act like it's all America doing all these things. All America's trying to do is, bring some order to the place, I think, really. I don't think, and I understand the Americans don't even rely on Iraqi oil, actually. They have their own sources, apparently, and most of Iraqi oil goes to China and Japan. Yeah, so, it's nothing to do with America, the oil in Iraq particularly. So that's the myth that America is involved in all that, but I think America really wanted to try to help out the situation, and Saddam Hussein was a brutal monster, and he had made certain commitments to the American government. That's why they released him and released his forces after the Gulf War, and he went back on all those commitments he made, and he must have killed around 200,000 or 300,000 Shiites and 100,000 Kurds or something, and that's a dishonor to the Americans for someone that they let go to behave like that. So they sought an excuse, the weapons of mass destruction, but they really, the Bush people around him really wanted to not just pay him back, but to say you can't treat your commitments to America like this. I don't think it wasn't just a matter of weapons of mass destruction. That's why it wasn't a matter simply of they're supporting terrorists. They were supporting terrorists. They were giving all the suicide bombers in Palestine something like $20,000 every time one blew himself up. They give it to the families. That's what Saddam Hussein was doing. In any case, that's not a reason to go to war, but the point was, I think they wanted to try to perform on American commitments for right or wrong, and they didn't do it in a very good way, but they were picking up the pieces of the British. So, back to Iraq. The situation in Iraq is you have an artificial country being held together in an artificial manner. Just like in the Balkans, just like everywhere else. And now when you take the monster away, the glue, the murderer that holds it all together and frightens everyone into submission, you see what happens. So what's the answer? To my mind, the answer is to stop trying to hold the whole thing together and let it go out into its constituent parts where it naturally was in the first place, before all the British and Americans got involved in it. But this is what they don't want to do. So Americans are going to keep on getting killed there till they decide to let the thing go the way it's supposed to go. But they can't let then one side bully the other. So they have to at least give some support to the Kurds, who are friendly and who love America, and are doing very, very well and are not killing anybody. If the Shiites are not killing people and so on, give them some support and so on. And stop the Sunnis from the middle